afternoon. Thank you everyone for coming. We are going to get started, and without further ado, I just wanted to introduce Congressman Glenn Ivey, who's going to be providing remarks for the event, one of the greatest champions for the immigrant community and dreamers. So give it a hand for Mr. Ivey.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you all putting this event together. I know Representatives Garcia and Levin would love to be here for this. They've done outstanding work on this issue, and I know sponsored legislation and done great things as well. So definitely, but the good fortune for me is I only live about 8 miles over that way in Prince George's County, so it's an easy drive for me. It also means I have a very large community in my district, much of it from El Salvador, Central America, Mexico, and the like. I know they've had a lot of the challenges that we've seen with respect to the attacks from ICE and the ongoing immigration challenges that the Trump administration seems to dream up new ways to attack the dreamers, which is beyond tragic. It really is. So I think it's critical for us to make sure we continue to do this kind of work. And the film that Sam put together, I think, is a very powerful statement on behalf of the effort that needs to be made to continue this fight. And I know you got a great panel after that as well, doing a lot of great work. You know, Diana's doing, I'm going to talk about the current attacks and delays on detention, which has been a real issue for me. Kilmar Abrego Garcia is in my district, and watching, I used to be a prosecutor at the Department of Justice, and watching the abuse of the Department of Justice, and really every piece of the apparatus that the Trump administration could come up with to attack this man who wasn't doing anything but coming out of, I think it was a Home Depot, is really sad. It's consistent with what he's done to abuse the Department of Justice, turned it into a Department of Retribution. But this is one of those pieces where the abuse, I think, really calls out to the public. And we saw what happened in Minneapolis. I think the shootings there were turning points in the Trump administration. I think there were parts of the American public, especially people who voted for him, who really didn't understand how ugly this effort was on the attack on the immigrant community. But I think that started to open some eyes. So I think it's great to have you all here. I know Maldef's here, is going to do a legal presentation as well. One of the organizations that's been doing outstanding work for many, many years. I first came here as a staffer in 1987 working for Congressman John Conyers, and Maldef was already on the job doing great work, and so I appreciate that, and we need it now more than ever for sure. So without further ado, I'll turn it back over, but I want to thank all of you all for coming, for all the work that you're doing on the field and here in the halls of Congress and in the courts, because we need to fight this on all fronts to really have a chance to turn it around. And it's going to take some time. And the sad thing is, in the meantime, thousands of people's lives are being just, undermined or destroyed by what's happening here. But I think it's a reminder for us every day of why we've been called to this mission to address this and fight against it. So thanks again for coming. Appreciate the work you're going to do. The panel's going to be great. Look forward to seeing the movie. Everybody have a great one.
Again, thanks for coming. We're going to get into a very interesting conversation, but before we do, just wanted to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Gabby Pacheco, and I am the president and CEO of the Dream.us. The Dream.us is the nation's largest scholarship program for dreamers, and we are at the intersection of higher education, career access, and advocacy.
Hey everyone, thanks for being here today. My name is Samuel Solomon. I'm the subject and co-director of the film, and I'm joined here by my wonderful documentary team today, Bakhtash, Saritha, Michael, Ellie, Mark over here, Evan, who was kind enough to film this all for us in New York, and Adrian, who is somewhere in the room, and Jasmine, so that's me.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Diana Pliego. I'm a senior strategist at the National Immigration Law Center, where our mission is to protect and advance the rights of low-income immigrants and their families. I'm also a former DACA recipient, and so this is an issue very near and very dear to my heart because many my community members and loved ones still have DACA, and at Milk I get to work on DACA and our DACA campaign with the Homeless Here Coalition, so I'm very excited to be here with you all.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrea Centino. I am the Regional Counsel for the Washington, D.C. Office of MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, which is a leading national civil rights organization that works to protect the civil rights of all Latinos living in the United States. Much of our work includes policy and litigation to advance immigrants' rights in this country.
Thank you all so much for joining us for this panel. We can maybe figure out mics, hopefully. My name is Ruby Flores. I'm the Policy Director for the Hispanic Caucus. It's a great pleasure putting this together. I also wanted to thank Jasmine and Sam, but Jasmine was really perseverant and great partner in getting this actually together, so big shout out to her. Also wanted to thank the Office of Mike Levin, where this film and idea actually came from, and Rep. Sylvia Garcia, both of whom are co-sponsors of this event and great champions on the cause, and also for .us and UnitedWeDream for co-sponsoring this event with us today. So why don't we get started on the questions for the panel? Gabby, why don't we begin, when this all began? I think you were part of some of the 4 individuals that had a walk from Miami to DC in 2010. I'm actually not sure if it was called the Trail of Dreams by you all or if it was done by the media. I'd love for you to take us back to that moment in 2010, the push for the Obama administration to create the program in 2012, and really what it took, right, in that moment of advocacy and continued pressure.
Let's see if does this work? Yes? Okay, great, we got the mics working. Hello again. One thing that Deanna mentioned, she was like, oh, I'm a former DACA recipient. I'm also a former DACA recipient, former dreamer. And it's really important that if we're going to talk about DACA and what led to DACA, that we actually go back to the 1990s. And we talk about the organizing that was happening in New York, specifically for Families for Freedom. This was an organization of young people who were fighting the deportation of Muslim men, the discrimination against Black and brown men, and they were using this thing called deferred action that was first used by, let's see, whoever knows this gets a cookie. Who was the first person ever to get deferred action? Does anyone know? John Lennon. Who got it? You get the cookie, yes. So John Lennon was the first person ever to get deferred action. And so deferred action, practically what it is a deferral of an action, right? So in his case was the deferral of his deportation. They were trying to deport him because he spoke out against the war, and there was a drug, marijuana charge that they were trying to get him on. And so his attorneys used this thing, and ever since then we've had deferred action. And so in the 1990s that was being used. At the same time, there were young people all across the United States, from California, Texas, Massachusetts, fighting for access not just to higher education, but belonging. They had grown up in this country, they were graduating from the high schools, but they were not being given access to really belong like their classmates into the society, into their communities, into our country. And so you had from UCLA, there was a group of young people that got together, ideas. In Texas, ULI, and in Texas actually was the first state that passed an in-state tuition legislation in 2001, and these all started being propped up. And this energy from young people that were saying, we are part of this country, this is where we belong. Give us a chance, give us an opportunity to be integrated into it, was started harnessing, and then we started kind of connecting with each other and realizing the power in numbers. So fast forward to 2009, when we had President Barack Obama, who in 2008 had promised immigration reform. We know that priorities were on healthcare, a big win on healthcare, but we started seeing the detention and deportation of dreamers. And so we started asking for deferred action and started winning on individual cases of people from all across the United States that we used deferred action to stop their deportations. And we dreamed and said, what about if we were to ask this at a grand scale? And so in our walk in 2010, on January 1, 2010, we had our decree and our ask to President Obama to give us deferred action. All of that moved really quickly into what was a fight for immigration reform, a fight for the DREAM Act, and unfortunately, in 2010, even though the House of Representatives passed the DREAM Act, in the Senate, we were 5 votes short of overcoming a filibuster and being able to pass the DREAM Act in 2010. And that was a huge blow to all of us. I remember, I don't know if some of you were in that room when that happened, but there were hundreds of dreamers that were watching in the Senate gallery wearing caps and gowns as they were taking the votes one by one. And I remember having to stand up and leave because I knew we did not have the votes to be able to overcome the filibuster and get to 60. And we had a press conference in a similar room right here on the Senate side where Senator Durbin and others shared and said, I'm not going to forget this, but he said to us, please don't give up on me. I won't give up on you. And so I remember being pulled into a room with Senator Harry Reid, where he did a full-on interview with Telemundo, Univision, La Opinión, CNN Español, and they sat me right next to him, and they had a whole entire interview where they blamed Republicans and said, this we could have passed. And I was really, really angry because I knew that there was 5 Democrats that could have voted for it and 5 Democrats that didn't show up to vote that day. And so we could have had the DREAM Act, and all that harness and all that power that young people were gathering were like pushing, right, for the president to do something. I remember asking Harry Reid, he stood up after the interview, I stood up with him and I whispered in his ear, this is not fair, this is not enough, that the president could give us deferred action. And so fast forward to 2011, we got what was called the Morton Memo. It was supposed to be priorities from ICE to not deport dreamers. We were still seeing dreamers being detained. And then in 2012, President Obama had a decision to make, and young people and members of Congress and senators pushed the president to not just do the moral thing, but the political savvy thing, which was give dreamers deferred action. And yesterday we celebrated 14 years of deferred action. It is historically one of the most successful immigration policies that has been implemented. It lifted close to 1 million people out of the shadows. It allowed for people like Diana, Sam, and myself to be able to go to school, build their careers, buy homes, have children. Today, there are over 300,000 children that have a parent, and probably a lot more, parent that is a DACA recipient. DACA recipients are teachers and nurses and social workers and business owners. And unfortunately today, this is the second Trump administration that we have. The first Trump administration, he tried to end DACA. We were able to successfully win in the Supreme Court, but today they're doing it again and trying to end DACA without no policy, but slowing down the process, doing things behind the scenes. And it's really unfortunate because one, we could have had this solved years and years ago. The DREAM Act has been introduced for now 25 years. And there are people like Sam that are today suffering, right, because of the uncertainty, because of the unfairness of a program that we pay into every 2 years to be able to renew. And now we have a government that is completely failing us.
Thank you so much, Gabby.
Short mini version.
No, I mean,
Sorry.
working 20 years of advocacy, 20 plus years of advocacy into a couple minutes is not easy. But I think you took us from the past and the beginnings of the program to the issues that are facing today, right? And so, I mean, Sam, the amazing documentary that you made along with a tremendous team, it really captures the moment of what is happening right now, right? And it captures something that statistics can't, right? I think the emotional toil of living in this continued limbo. So wondering if you can share with us what made you want to share this story publicly, and what do you hope that comes out of this film?
Yeah, so, you know, this project originally was not going to be this. I started creating a documentary just about my own experience with immigration. And, you know, with documentary, I've learned that you just keep the cameras rolling and life will unfold. And so, you know, what started as an exploration of my immigration identity turned into documenting one of the most pressing issues of our time, which is immigration. And so, you know, a story that really, or a moment during this whole process that really stuck with me was I was trying to back away from this project because I didn't know what was going to happen to me. And I got dinner with one of my producers, and he straight up asked me, he was like, you know, hopefully this won't happen, but you can either tell your story and get deported, or you cannot tell your story and get deported. And I think that really just stopped me in my tracks and made me think, like, you know, what do I want to leave behind? And, you know, I think throughout this whole entire process, you find the courage to do things like this, you know, tell your story, advocate for things that you never thought you'd advocate for. And, you know, I'm happy that we're here, and I'm happy that I can be a voice for so many. And I think, what do I hope changes as a result? I mean, I would love for the DREAM Act to be passed. You know, it's before in the past it didn't feel like a weight I had to carry of, you know, every 2 years I have to renew my status, but now it's just, you know, in the film I said I plan my life in 5-year cycles, and now I really think about where I'm going to be tomorrow. And so I would love for the DREAM Act to be brought to the floor and passed soon.
I don't think it's lost on any of us, the incredible bravery that I have to say. Diana, so, you know, Sam was touching a bit on this. Gabby mentioned it at the end, but, you know, the DACA program is going through deaths by 1,000 cuts by the administration. And it's something that NILC is really focused on, right? So, I mean, just to mention a couple of things, that there's been hundreds of DACA recipients have been detained. We know, thanks to the advocacy of some of the offices here, that a number of them have been deported. Folks with active status have dropped into 500,000 when there was peaks of hundreds of thousands more. Can you just walk us through those attacks that the administration is going through, right? From delays, from not respecting the deferred enforcement, from eligibility caps, right? The dates, as well as, we'll get to the legal battle with Andrea in a second that also affects a number of people. But you can just walk us through these cuts that the administration is putting on the program.
Yeah, definitely. Is this working? No.
It turns red.
I don't think. Hello? Oh, hello, can you hear me? Perfect. You just have to press it a certain way. Okay. Yeah, I have the fun job of telling us everything that is falling apart. And I just want to first thank Sam for really showing us a very vulnerable moment in your life when you had that call with your mom. It just brought me back to when I'm alone, where I thought that was happening to my parents and my dad, and I stayed on the phone for 30 minutes. And, you know, my dad got lucky, but he literally, like, was almost in that circumstance. And I don't know what in the stars aligned to get him out of that with that cop letting him go, but it just breaks my heart that we're still facing the exact same issues years and years later. And I think one of the things that I want us to, like, really take away right now is that DACA is effectively being killed slowly, and their strategy is to do it as quietly as possible. And it is our jobs to lift our voice, to tell the stories, to talk about the parents, our parents who are also affected, because it's about us, but it's also about them. I always call them the original dreamers. Everything you admire about us is because of them. I want to open with that, but I also want to just lay out exactly what is happening and how the administration is actually trying to kill DACA without actually formally doing it. We saw what happened last time. We were able to sue them, took them all the way to the Supreme Court, and we won. And there's a lot of reasons, including DACA's popularity, the popularity of Dreamers, right, for why they might not want to outright end it the way they did last time. So what have they been doing? Since the administration took office, they did something like take away ACA access to healthcare for DACA recipients, something that took us a long time as advocates to make right in the first place. They went in and took it away. And then we started hearing anecdotally, without official confirmation, stories here and there of DACA recipients getting caught up in the enforcement efforts. And so what did? We worked with members of Congress to submit inquiries. What is going on? Why are DACA recipients being detained? Why are they potentially being deported? And we got confirmation in February of this year that yes, they have been detaining and deporting DACA recipients. They gave us confusing numbers that did not add up. We went back to them and said, why is that adding up? They came back to us and gave us even more confusing numbers. But from what we can put together, we can say that it's been at least 300 DACA recipients who have been detained and at least 90 have been deported. But I want to emphasize that this is just what we know of. Because how many people don't get their story told, don't get a news article about their story, right? Then around the same time when we're dealing with all of this actively, trying to support as a Homeless Coalition, trying to support individuals where we can, uplifting their stories, getting some successes, getting some folks out of detention, some folks have even been able to be brought back. We're also facing a very, very cruel, slow death via the delays that we're seeing. All of a sudden we start hearing that folks are taking months and months to renew. And I want you to know that as a DACA recipient, you're doing calendar math every 2 years of like, when do you actually renew this? Because they don't automatically renew it from the moment that your current DACA expires. They renew it from whenever they approve it. Which means if they get to it early, you could have an overlapping period and miss out on several months, right? So you're always doing that math of like, how can I get the most? You're following the trends, you're in the online forum seeing how long is it taking other people, when should I actually submit? Do I follow the USCIS guidance and get an overlap? Or do I risk it, submit it a little later, but then I have less overlap so that I can have more time? It's a constant anxiety that you're facing. And what was happening was a lot of people naturally were probably starting to submit, not necessarily maybe during the recommended window, and maybe 2-3 months out. Or some people still following those guidelines all started experiencing extreme delays, which means people were starting to lose their DACA, to lose their jobs, to lose their driver's licenses, and be exposed even more to the possibility of deportation. We can even see influencers online right now telling their stories, documenting the other side hustles they're having to do because they lost their job that they had access to. Then we get things like the Board of Immigration Appeals issuing decisions where it used to be that a judge could issue, say, you know what, if you're performing with the termination proceeding and you have DACA, no, you have DACA, that's enough. Now they're saying, no, you have to address your judgment in a certain way and make sure you include the government's oppositions, their arguments and things like that. In some ways trying to really scare us into thinking it's not enough to protect us, but we know that it still is. It is supposed to be. And what they're doing is unlawful. When they are targeting DACA recipients, that is unlawful. And that is why we've been able to see some folks returned. But it takes an army, and I want to emphasize that not everybody gets an attorney and gets all the media attention to be able to be brought back, and that is what it's taking to be able to get folks back. We also saw a recent kind of quiet change at the USCIS level to their manual, which was really concerning because it was trying to impact all of deferred action. In theory, it shouldn't have impacted DACA, but they made some small little quiet changes just on the policy manual of who gets to have DACA. Things like their criminal history, things that in the past maybe wouldn't have affected folks might now be impacting folks. Their public safety or national security concerns, we know what that means and we know how this administration interprets that. Whether or not they have endorsed, promoted, or otherwise espoused anti-American views online, for example. We know of DACA recipients right now in detention because they said something that this administration did not like, right? And so now we are extremely concerned with how they're going to take these new quiet changes and actually grant DACA to folks that maybe previously had no other concerns, right? So I had the fun job of laying all of that out, right? And that is why we call it death by 1,000 cuts, because it is one thing after another. These past few months have been intense, where it genuinely feels like every week there is some new thing that is happening, but it is so hard for it to get the wide attention. And I am not even sure at this point if the administration will end up ultimately doing what we fear most, which is outright terminating, right? It's possible that they think they're doing enough damage this way, and that is why we have to be loud. And all of the allies here have to join us in uplifting what is happening, raising the alarm, and making sure that people tell the stories of the folks who are living very real lives in a high level of anxiety that I cannot imagine, because it is so much more than, oh, are the court's going to take it away this time. It is seeing real people, friends and family who have DACA, be told to their faces, your DACA doesn't matter anymore, and still being placed in detention, and still possibly ending up deported. That is not a life that anyone should live. And if we have something called deferred action for child arrivals that is supposed to grant you protection from deportation, that should not be happening. And I never thought there'd be a day where I would see DACA recipients detained and deported so carelessly and cruelly. So thank you for being here, and I want that to be the main takeaways. They're trying to do it quietly. We have to be loud. We have to raise the alarm, and we have to be ready, especially for allies who maybe we are lucky enough to have a little bit more protection, to stand up and be there for the folks who are at more risk right now. So I'll leave with that.
Thanks, Diana. I think the backdrop of all of the things that were laid out by you is the legal fight. So Andrea Maldev has been there from the beginning in 2018, and I mean, Jesus, I'm a policy nerd, and I forget all the things that have happened, right? Can you walk us through a little bit, as brief as possible, some of the fights in the Supreme Court, but the latest decision that came from the Fifth Circuit, right, ruled the program unlawful, but kept the program in place for current recipients, barred new recipients from applying, and then kept the injunction in Texas. It's a lot, right? So for the non-lawyers in the room, can you try to lay out what does that mean for current DACA recipients, and what's really the next decision point that we're waiting for, and what would be the next steps to follow this legal fight in the courts?
Definitely. And thank you all for having us here to talk about, these issues. They're incredibly important. They've been going on for a really long time. And there is still so much work that we can be doing together. So for those of you who are not as familiar, in 2018, Texas and 6 other states filed a lawsuit in federal court in the Southern District of Texas to end DACA. Maldev represents individual DACA holders who intervened in that lawsuit to defend the DACA program. And they have been part of that litigation since the beginning of that case. So, as that case has been working its way through the courts, in January of 2025, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit ruled on the legality of DACA. The appellate court's decision there held that part of DACA is unlawful because it is inconsistent with the Federal Immigration and Nationality Act. Specifically, the Fifth Circuit held that work authorization is not a lawful part of DACA. But I want to say the court limited its decisions in several important ways. First, the decision upheld the part of DACA that protects DACA recipients from deportation. The court decided that forbearance from removal is a lawful exercise of presidential discretion. And so what that means is that DACA can be granted for new and renewing applicants of DACA in all parts of the country, including in Texas. Second, the appellate court limited its implementation of its ruling to the state of Texas. And what that means is that under the Fifth Circuit's ruling, DACA recipients outside of the state of Texas are still able to receive work authorization as part of their DACA. So where we find ourselves now is the case has gone back down to the district court in front of the district court judge, Judge Hayden, who has been presiding over this case since 2018. It is now his task to determine what happens next, meaning how is the Fifth Circuit ruling going to be implemented. And he has to create some process, right, to create a more limited DACA program in Texas that provides the protection from deportation but does not provide the work authorization. And so with that, Judge Hainan did ask for briefing from all the parties on several different questions about how the decision should be implemented. All of that briefing was concluded last year. Those briefs contained proposals, ideas, suggestions from all the parties about how to move forward in the resolution of this case. But I want to be really clear, those were not actual determinations of what is going to happen. Those were just suggestions, including suggestions by the federal government. Any actual implementation of what comes next will be in the form of a court order. And this is really important because unfortunately after those briefs were filed, we saw so much misinformation, sometimes from other practitioners, other attorneys, who saw the briefs and said, this is what's going to happen. It creates a lot of panic, right, when we have misinformation about the litigation, about the status of DACA for people. And we're talking about, you're seeing here, people rely on up-to-date, accurate information. These are their lives. And so we want to make sure that we're being really diligent in getting information from reputable sources when there are new developments. And so where that leaves us now, right, is that DACA renewals continue. We do, and they continue in all 50 states. People can and they should renew. Now that all happens on the backdrop of what you've just heard here and the kind of quiet death that feels like is happening to DACA right now. But in terms of the litigation and the legal status of DACA, that is where we find ourselves as we wait for what comes next from Judge Hainan about how we will move forward in the implementation of the Fifth Circuit ruling. And so with that, I just want to say, it's really important that people are getting their information from good sources that have accurate information. It's really important that we are informing our community members about what is true and what is the status of things right now, particularly because we know that there are individuals out there who are telling folks, I'm going to help you, submit your new application, get you to the front of the line. And we want to make sure that people are being really, really careful about where they go for information and about going to a reputable immigration attorney to make sure that they're getting screened, to make sure that they are doing what they need to be doing, but that they're getting accurate information back, right, about what is possible in their situation. And I'll just leave it with, you have heard today, right, and Diana has so well laid out kind of the backdrop of what the litigation is, how the litigation is moving forward in this context. And so, as we all kind of watch for what next steps the government may or may not take formally with respect to the DACA regulation, or informally through these other quiet measures, right, that we can't necessarily say, yes, it is because, they've taken this policy and we can find the directive here that somehow changes the government's approach, I guess, or engagement with DACA holders. We have to be very watchful and prepared for whatever is coming next and looking for all of the signs that we can about how we need to be protecting each other. So as we're commemorating, right, the anniversary of DACA and the great benefit that it's provided not just individuals but to our entire country, we really have to take this opportunity to be working to advance legislation forward and to provide individuals lasting and meaningful relief. I'm happy to answer questions.
Wonderful. So I'm going to pose one more question to the group, but next up we would love to hear a couple of questions from the audience. So you want to be thinking about a question that you have and raise your hand in just a second. We'll pass the mic to the audience. But the other piece that I just wanted to make sure we touch on with this panel of experts is a huge generation, a new generation of young people that are being really, are not able to be protected through this program for two reasons, right? As Andrea mentioned, new applications are barred, right? So it's only people that have been able to reapply for the status. But also by the nature of the program itself, it was supposed to be temporary. And so people, there was a date of when people were supposed to be in the country. But of course, there's been new young people that arrived in the country since that would otherwise be eligible for the program but can't actually apply. So we'd love to hear from the entire panel, whomever wants to go first, what you're seeing on the ground, what does this mean for the population, and what is it, how does it actually affect the communities in which they live, that these young people are falling through the gaps?
So we just released part of the DACA anniversary, our alumni survey report, and it's titled The Authorization Gap. And today, next fall, we're going to have over 3,000 Dream.US scholarship recipients that are going to be in school. Majority of them are fully undocumented. They do not have DACA. And we are seeing those that are graduating, what is happening to them. Really quickly, just some numbers. From the 2,500, a little over 2,500 scholarship recipients that filled out the survey, we know that with work authorization, 84% of them are earning full-time income, 8% of them part-time, and then there's 7% that are right now looking for opportunities. We're talking about it during a time where financially our economy is doing really bad. And people are hurting, and yet 84% of our folks are working full-time, versus those who have graduated and are fully undocumented. Earning income full-time is only 43%, earning income part-time is 24%, and there's 33% of them that are looking for income opportunities. So we see, right, what happens. Sam in the film talks about losing DACA and also potentially losing his driver's license. If you're undocumented, you cannot get a driver's license. If you're undocumented, likely if you are in certain states, you're not going to be able to access higher education. There's so much, right? Banking, things that we take for granted, getting a library license. One of the things that I remember very vividly when we were undocumented was one of the four that walked, Carlos Roa. He would walk around with his Venezuelan passport that he got when he was 2 years old. And when we wanted to go to a club or buy a drink, he had to show that passport that had a picture of him when he was 2 years old. Sometimes he'll get lucky. Majority of the times people would say, you can't come in here, right? And think about it being a 19, 20, 21-year-old that wants to live, that wants to take somebody out to dinner or wants to hang out. Their lives, right? The everyday lives of human beings that we kind of sometimes take for granted, young people in our country cannot access. And so what is really interesting about this, right, is that we have been able to see what happens in our lives when we do have access to that work authorization. One of the things, again, that we take for granted is being able to get health insurance. So a lot of the people, we know of many DACA recipients that have reached out to us that their DACA has been delayed and they've lost their jobs. They've also lost their health insurance. And there's people that depend on their health insurance to be able to get their medications, right? And so it is in essence, like the ground beneath all these individuals has fallen through. And we have only right now a little under 500,000 individuals that have DACA, about 100,000 of them that submitted an application, that paid the government to process their application, that were fingerprinted, and that it has been years and years, and their application is just stalled and waiting for them. The last thing I want to say is that there are dreamers. One of the things that in this report it talks about is that dreamers are not kids, right? They are, the average DACA recipient today is 32, probably the youngest is about 25, the oldest is about 42. We are also adults. We are part of our communities, and it's really important that we remember, right, the younger generation of dreamers, the ones in between that weren't able to apply, And practically, right, when you look at the Dream and Promise Act, when you look at the DREAM Act, all this legislation will be able to capture this community of people. And it's really important that when we are talking about Dreamers, that yes, we talk about DACA, that yes, we talk about the success of the program, that we talk about what is happening with DACA recipients and those that are from African countries, Muslim countries, countries that right now are part of a ban, and because of that, their DACAs have been frozen. We're still yet to hear any DACA recipient from any of those countries that they've processed this. But remember that it's not just one group of people, right? It's an array of them, and we cannot, as we move this forward, forget any one of them.
I think I'll offer a more personal perspective. I think, where I'm from, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, I'm a photographer and filmmaker, and so I get to work with a lot of small businesses. And what I've had to explain over the process the last 2.5 years of making this documentary is that I'm not a U.S. citizen. And I think for a lot of my life, I had a lot of, I don't want to say shame, but I mean it's just this weight on my shoulder of how do I tell people that I'm not a citizen, and when you're young, you don't even know what that means. And so I think for me, it's been a lot of education for people who really don't know, and I've been able to meet a lot of DACA recipients through this process as well, and we've all kind of had the same, for lack of better terms, trauma bond, knowing that we might not have another tomorrow here. But it's also I feel really connected with them, knowing that we're all going through a similar process. And especially now with a lot of the delays happening, we are all checking in on each other, making sure that if there's a delay in the application process, we're showing up for each other. Mental health is super important to me, and this weight that we all carry really takes a toll on us.
My answer to this question is also a little more personal and more anecdotal, because I think the stats that Gabby shared, I think my life is an example of what happened when I was given that opportunity, because it was actually not just me, it was my brothers who were given the opportunity to have DACA. And for us, there's a ripple effect. It's not just our lives that are changed, it's our entire family, our ecosystem, our community. For my family, DACA brought us out of poverty. I grew up not realizing just how poor we were until literally all of us could finally work, and then we filled out the free meal program application, and I realized we still qualify. And that was a household of 6, everybody working, including both parents, kids, everybody, because of DACA, able to work. And we not only I thought maybe at least we'll be even reduced now. No, we still fully qualified for free lunch. And DACA brought us out and has allowed me to enter spaces and live a life that I never could have imagined. And I think about how I've been able to then also, impact my family, my community. And if you were to take DACA away, all of those ripple effects are also impacted, right? The teachers that might be pulled from classrooms, the nurses, the doctors that would have to stop serving their patients where we're in a shortage of healthcare workers, right? It's not just our lives, it is, and it completely, but we have to really think about this from the perspective of everybody that our lives touch, right? And so I think of the folks who are so unfairly being left out, whether it's because of an outdated number on the DACA program or the litigation or all of these things that are happening. And I know that our community is so resilient. Look up any of the DACA folks who are so bravely sharing their story day by day on social media, and you will see we are creative, we are hardworking, and we will push through, and we will make a life for ourselves. But also think of it in how much we are limiting how we can contribute back to this country, right? Not allowing people to do what they love and are so good at, forcing people into very specific things that they can do for a job. Like I said, pulling them from the classrooms, and maybe now they have to, you know, sell food instead of teaching your kids and raising up our next generation. We are limiting people by our lack of action. And I just want people to, you know, I'm so inspired constantly by our community, and knowing that, you know, we have that same drive that our parents did when they brought us here, and like we will find a way to live, to not just survive, but to find our version of thriving in all the circumstances, right? But then we need to do our best to make sure that we give everybody the opportunity to more fully thrive, to live out their true dreams, to live out the ways that that they can contribute to their community that are the most meaningful to them in their life, right? Not limiting people because of a little piece of paper. So,
I'll be quick in my response. I think this question really makes me think about the broad-based attacks that we are all living through, to the immigrant population, to populations of color, to women, you name it. And this is all, you know, part of that larger agenda to remove protections and remove opportunities that were previously available to people. And yes, a lot of those protections and opportunities were not enough, and we needed to have more. But what we're seeing, right, is an asserted effort that is multifaceted across government agencies, right, to make people's lives more difficult, to make people's lives more tenuous and more fragile than it already was. And so for me, when we're talking about those who fall in the gap, right, we're talking about a population that is growing and growing and growing because of the actions of this administration and the lack of action from Congress. But, you know, those are actions to limit pathways, to limit protections, and it means that we really need to double down, I think, in our efforts to move through Congress, something that's meaningful for populations, but also to, you know, push our communities, right, to be demanding a change. And, you know, I think what we've been seeing with respect to communities, you know, standing up in different places to ICE abuse, and being supportive of each other is incredibly important. We are going to need to rely on each other to get through this period, and then to advance when we have a chance to advance something that actually benefits people and benefits our communities and benefits the U.S.
So knowing we are close on time, there's also tweets in the back that I want folks to get to. But we'll just take 2 questions maybe, take them together and close the panel out. So if anybody has a question, can you raise your hand? And our fabulous team will come get you. I only see,
There's 2 right here.
2 and then a 3rd one. Why don't we take all 3 and just wrap it up?
Hello. Hello, my name is Giancarla Rojas. I am a former DACA recipient. I wrote my question so I wouldn't forget. You all have dedicated years to the immigration movement and have carried the weight of countless people's stories, including your own. How do you navigate the emotional impact of this work? And how do you ensure that you're leading from your scars, the wisdom that you gain, rather from your own wounds? Thank you.
Right over here, Matt. Right over here.
Hello everyone, my name is Valentina Moreno. Thank you all for being here, for sharing your story in the documentary, Sam, and then everyone else for sharing your stories and your work today. It's incredibly inspiring. I also wrote down my questions so that I knew how to articulate myself. But you all have laid out today how the Trump administration is silently but persistently attacking DACA. Considering the Supreme Court victory that we had in the first Trump administration, these decisions are very practical moves from the executive branch, but is there a certain threshold that can be passed when these administrative delays and restrictions could be challenged in the courts, and where we could have some sort of victory like we did in the first Trump administration, or would we have to wait for a very serious policy move to end DACA to challenge it in the courts? Thank you.
Hi there, thank you all so much for your time and for sharing your stories. My name is Eva, I'm an intern with Amnesty, and I'm also a college student. My question pertains to how college students can help advocate on their campuses. For students who are perhaps more privileged to have statuses where they're better protected, how can we be better allies for the DACA community and the undocumented community? And what actions do you suggest we can take to help support things that are going through Congress and help challenge actions taken by the Trump administration? Thank you so much.
Andrea, I can take two. I'll start with one. Hello, my dear. So good seeing you. I just want to say that, at least for me, I came to this space with this desire as a high schooler to find the adults in my life that would help me figure out the way to go to college. In my mind, as a 16-year-old telling everybody that I didn't have papers and that I really wanted to go to college, I didn't have that fear that a lot of people, it's real, right, to share your story. And I actually did have immigration come after me and look for me and try to silence me in 2006, and they detained my parents and my sisters. And it was decades of a battle to keep my family here in the United States, and feeling so much guilt for speaking up and sharing my story and putting my family in that position. But throughout that, when I look back at the 16-year-old and I'm now today 41 years old, as a former dreamer, formerly undocumented, DACA recipient, and today a US citizen, I really understand, one, the fight that not just my parents but my ancestors, right? I look at my grandmother and the life that she lived, and the women in my life who fought so that I can have what I have today. And despite the fact that today I'm a US citizen, last year when I needed to travel for work overseas, I started having panic attacks and waking up in the middle of the night screaming and crying because I thought I was going to get detained on my way back. And so I know the injustice that we have to live every single day. And I know that we stand on the shoulders of giants, and I know that I have to play a role and a part of making sure that we deliver for our communities. Because I know what it feels like to be scared and to have fear. I know that I haven't been able to overcome that. But I also know what it takes, what Andrea was saying, when we come together and the wins that we've been able to win. We were able to win in-state tuition, we've been able to win licensures, we've been able to win DACA. And it really took people coming together and saying, we're going to politically extract a win for our community that we deserve. And so every single day I wake up with my mind set that we're going to pass the DREAM Act. When anybody tells us, oh, next Congress, I shut my ears. I literally go, no, I don't want to hear you. I shut sometimes my team members down when they tell me about that, and I'm like, absolutely not, it needs to happen this year. And so that determination that I have comes from the realities, right, of the pain that I know our community is living in, and also that for as all the terrible things that we have seen this country do and continuously do, I've also seen the beautiful things, and the beautiful things comes from us. So I believe in us, and I believe in that power that we have to do that. And so really quickly to shift and to give some things that college students can do. Man, when I was a college student, I felt like I was invincible. I can do everything and anything. I can stay up all night. I cannot do that now. If somebody was to ask me today, can you do this walk from Miami to Washington, D.C., I would laugh in their face and say, like, absolutely not. I'll be in the car or meet you. I'm flying up there and hope that I get upgraded to first class. It's gotten a little bougie, but hey, I've taken many flights. I do like 100 flights a year. But what I would say is it's really, really important that we have allies and we have people speaking with us, not speaking for us. And I think that's really important. Dreamers need to be in, and the people affected need to be in the tables, in the conversations. It is about our lives, and so it's really important that we are joined with the teachers and the churchgoers, that we use our voice to demand Congress to take action, to demand that this president and members of Congress who have yet to sign on to the DREAM Act or the Dream and Promise Act and the other legislations that would really deliver for our communities to take action. It's really important that we also, today, I would not tell a DACA recipient to submit their DACA by themselves. I would tell them hire an attorney, and a really good attorney, right? And that takes money, that takes resources. It's really hard to renew, right? There's people that are not renewing on time because they don't have the 555 or the 600 and whatever, 35, whatever the new number is, right, to submit your application. So like the GoFundMe campaigns are really important to support the folks who are needing the support right now. And the last thing is, I know that there's a lot of conversation about all the time mental health and on Instagram, right? But it's real, right? And so making sure that you're there to listen, that you're there to say, I'm here, can I go with you and just sit outside in the car for your biometrics appointment? Can we set up a plan in case something was to happen? Can I be your phone call? Memorize my number and I will help you find the attorney and guide if something was to happen to you. Those are the people that right now we need in our lives, and we can be creating and doing. This is like the beyond know your rights. We're really beyond that, and I think those are things, and we're happy to share more. There's also folks here from UnitedWeDream that do incredible organizing during the time that we were fighting for DACA. And I was trying to talk really fast. I was part of UnitedWeDream. I'm one of the co-founders of UnitedWeDream. We also have Forward.us that has incredible data. They just came up with a new report on DACA, and they have good statistical information that we can mirror, right, with our stories to share why this makes sense for the whole entire country to do. So I also would suggest to arm yourself with facts and data and the stories, and share. This is something that we're not going to be able to do with just this room. We need hundreds of thousands, millions of people to lift their voice for us to finally get something done for our community.
I think I'm only qualified to answer that first question, as I'm not a lawyer. So as far as the emotional impact of everything going on, I think it's safe to say, just as an immigrant, we are resilient people. Sometimes we don't have a choice in some of this stuff. DACA is something that was just thrown onto me, and I think for me, how I've navigated it is having a great team of people who have been by my side through every step of this whole entire journey, from when we first started the production to when my mom was detained and deported. They were the first people that I went to. And when you have a good base of people, life just becomes a little easier. And just throughout the last year, navigating having my mom deported to the Philippines and trying to get everything set up for her, it's been very difficult. But the other thing I want to say too is, I think as a dreamer here in America, I think it's important to stay hopeful. I think as soon as I have a feeling of, oh, this isn't going to work out for me, or I have to plan for the Philippines, and whatever might happen to me, I think it's always important to remain hopeful. I think a lot of us here in the room know that getting this DREAM Act passed is the right thing. We, as dreamers, don't have a choice in some of the decisions that are being made. We can't vote, we can't, and so I think it's been really, as I step into this advocacy space, I think it's been really good for me to just be hopeful, to dream that I will still have a future here in America, and that I'll be able to give back to my community in any capacity I can.
I'll quickly answer the second question about kind of opportunities, right? I think the difficult part of where we find ourselves isn't necessarily a shying away, right, from litigation, if I heard that in your question, but a recognition, right, that every kind of one of these different, let's say, actions or inaction sometimes, right, they have to be assessed, right, on its kind of fact by fact development, right, of what is going on with respect to that particular government action, policy, non-decision, or quiet kind of happenings. And so what makes that difficult is that, some of those things are going to be actionable and some of them are not. And it's really going to be dependent on what exactly happened, what was the form of the government action, and then what did that mean or how did that play out on the facts sometimes. And so what I will say is that, for all of these things, at MALDEF, at many other litigation organizations and our community partners and other advocates, I think we're always looking for more information in order to figure out what is actionable, what can we do something in the courts about. I think a lot of us recognize that the courts is one tool that we need to be using. At this moment, we've been using it, to some successes and sometimes to losses, but we've been using it as aggressively as we can to protect our communities and protect our civil rights and our constitutional rights. But it's one tool amid many tools that we all need to be pulling together. And so, I sit here as a lawyer, as someone who works for a litigation organization, and very much believes, right, that we, need to be always looking for what we can take action against, but also recognizing the limitation that litigation can have, right, for what we need. Because what we need right now is legislation. And what we need right now is for Congress to step in and start exerting some oversight over a rogue DHS. So I'll just end it with that. I think that we're looking for litigation angles when possible and always making those assessments. Sometimes we have to wait to see how something is implemented. Sometimes we can take action, before that. But that, this is one tool that we are using, and there are so many tools that you all have the power to use as well, even as non-lawyers. And I encourage everybody to be standing up and to be working together to demand something more.
I'll just be very brief and focus primarily on the question regarding the emotional toll being somewhat impacted. I'm really glad that Gabby, you shared even having citizenship, the anxiety doesn't ever go away. It took me a long time for it to even feel like I wasn't a DACA recipient anymore, and I still sometimes will include myself accidentally that is a core part of my identity at this point, out of my whole life. But one of the things that I have that has gotten me through, if you are someone out here in this audience or listening who is directly impacted, and also putting yourself out there as an advocate, it is hard. You have to find community, and I think you mentioned this, Sam, too. You have to find your people, even if it means trauma bonding a little bit. You have to find people who understand you, who you don't have to explain yourself to, who you can just be with, and they just get it. Those are the people that really help you get through on the hard days, because there are a lot of hard days. And you also have to find a way to truly take care of yourself, and if that's a bubble bath, that's great, and if that means finally seeing a therapist, you know, like address listening to your body and what it actually needs. Like there's actually, I could go on forever about this, but there's resources out there that talk about like how our bodies like really like keep the score on our trauma, and what we have gone through as a community is trauma. And I just encourage you to lean into that and figure out what it means to take care of yourself, to take care of the body you have, so that you can actually show up at your best self. And I think lastly, I would just say to find a way to stay grounded, and maybe this is for folks who were lucky enough to find our way in like to a different status with a little bit more protection. We have to still find a way to stay connected to the folks who we are fighting alongside, whose voices we're uplifting, right? We have to also check ourselves sometimes, right? Like maybe I think I might, you know, maybe I certainly might know more about something that from a perspective for maybe someone who's never gone through this, but I'm not currently living the life of a DACA recipient, which means I have to stay very in tune to what DACA recipients are currently facing, right? Check myself, is this what the community actually wants? Stay in close partnership, stay connected and grounded in those ways, and remind yourself of constantly like why you do this work, right? But at the end of the day, like it is really hard work, but we have to stay grounded in like what brought us here. And I have to remind myself, you know, like I benefited from DACA, right? It was just thrust upon me, but DACA did not just happen overnight. Gabby will personally attest to that, right? It took an army of people to put their lives on the line to make it happen, right? And there's so many people out there who I may never meet, but hopefully are benefiting in some very indirect way from some of the work that I do, right? And there might be a little me out there who is on the NILC website reading a resource like I was in high school, reading from the NILC website, getting information so that I knew what was going on. And there's a little me out there going through this right now, and I want to be a part of that army that they don't even know is out there fighting for them. So those are the things that like keep me going and keep me grounded.
Thank you all four of you so much. Thank you all for coming. I'll just close really briefly with saying that at least from the Congressional Hispanic Caucus side, from the members of Congress representatives through the offices, you know, like we understand the dire need for action, and this is exactly the kind of advocacy that helps us keep pushing that forward on the Hill. So we appreciate all of you being here and all of the work that you all do. Can we give another round of applause? There are treats in the back. Thank you all. We did it.